Today's guest is Feng Shui master Maria Green. Maria lived in a flat from hell, and this triggered her interest in how our spaces and surroundings affect us and set her on the path to the study of Feng Shui. In today's podcast, we're going to delve into what Feng Shui is and isn't, and how it can help you declutter your home.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here's your host, Ingrid Jansen.
Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Ingrid. If you're new to the Declutter Hub podcast, you're so welcome. What you'll find is that we try and find the fun factor in the serious business of decluttering. And if you've been here for a while, you know exactly what we mean. So thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get involved in conversations related to this podcast, it all takes place in our free Facebook group. So come and join our lovely, warm and supportive community. Go to declutterhub.com/group to find out more. Hello and welcome, Maria, to this podcast. I am genuinely buzzing with excitement that you're here because we have never in 250 episodes, this is episode 255, talked about Feng Shui. And I am delighted that our mutual friend Jane reached out to me and said, Ingrid, you need to get Maria on the podcast because she is the person in the know and she can tell you everything. So here we are. So I'm delighted. So thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's dive in. I have a lot of questions, but maybe we should start first with an obvious question. What is Feng Shui?
Well, it's quite a big answer, but generally it's the understanding of the energy of your environment. So what's around you and how that can affect you. And it's very, very ancient. It goes back 4,000 years to the Far East, to China, where they realized that if you lived somewhere that was supportive, that had nourishing spaces, fresh water, not too much wind, then it was a good, comfortable place to live. And the Feng is the wind and the Shui is the water. So the two together just embody that concept. And obviously now we live perhaps less rural existences, but still we need to if we understand how those spaces impact us, we can have a much more comfortable, supported environment.
So do I pronounce Feng Shui properly or do you say it differently?
I tend to say it slightly differently because I work with a grandmaster who speaks mostly Cantonese. So that's the pronunciation. So I tend to say Feng Shui unless I'm talking to someone who's not going to perhaps be expecting me to say those words, in which case I'll say Feng Shui. But there are so many dialects, you can't get it wrong. So whatever you like.
Okay, so I can stick with my Feng Shui.
Really
I'm not
can.
Offending anybody saying it this way. Okay, great. So interesting. So it's something that's been out there for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And how do you, this might be a question, I don't know if you know this, but how did it kind of come in? Because it started in China.
Yeah.
How did it kind of travel around the world? Were people fascinated by this concept?
Well, mostly it was kept secret for a long time. The real Feng Shui, so that's what we call imperial Feng Shui, because it was kept at the courts of the emperors, because they wanted the source of the secrets, the power, because a lot of Feng Shui, particularly in those days, was about where you buried your ancestors, so they supported you. So there's a different type of Feng Shui for burials, but obviously, if there's a source of power, a source of wealth, then the emperors wanted it and they didn't want anyone else to have it. So the Feng Shui masters used to be kept at the court and they weren't allowed to escape. They certainly weren't allowed to share that information. But when various upheavals and revolutions and things happened, some people sort of smuggled some texts out with them. So that's how it kind of went underground. But even the grandmaster I trained with, when his master sent him to the UK when he was I suppose in the 1970s, so he's a young man, and said they will need to know about this at some point because Feng Shui will become popular and you need to spread real Feng Shui. But it wasn't that popular with masters in Hong Kong because he was then sharing and teaching that information. So even, up to 25, 30 years ago, it wasn't a popular thing to actually spread what real Feng Shui is.
Wow. Okay. I'm fascinated. I love history and I love background and that kind of thing. So I'm with you on this journey, Maria. So let me then do the follow-up question. What isn't Feng Shui?
Well, it's not about sparse minimalists. It's not about having lots of chimes or crystals or things that represent sort of. It's quite a difficult one because it's chimes and crystals, and just having a door in this angle means that this is your relationship corner, and this it's not a standard thing. Mm-hmm. It's much more subtle. And real Feng Shui uses a Chinese compass. I've got one here, a Chinese compass. So it uses a compass for the calculations because they're so minute. Some of the readings are so minute. So, and when you're doing a consultation, it's a bit like, when you used to tune a TV aerial or a radio in, there's sometimes some really small reading or adjustments that are made. So it's not just putting what we call a bagua, that H-sided shape that people might have seen, on any room or any house. Because if it were that simple, we'd all have stimulated our wealth corner. We'd have all won the lottery. Our relationship corner would be marvelous. And I actually learnt that stuff to start with before I met Feng Shui Master. So, I kind of remember things like helpful people and career spaces, but it's not like that. Houses aren't as simple as that. It's like using your daily horoscope in the newspaper and thinking that's going to plot your whole life. Well, it's kind of might sometimes be right, but not often. So it's not that. That's really, it's a bit of a shame because obviously it would be so much simpler for everybody.
So tell me then, how did you end up being fascinated? Because it was not like you were born in a Feng Shui family and it was something happened, right, in your life that got you on this path. Can you share the story with us?
The flat from hell, basically. And it was, at the time, it took quite a long time to realize that things were linked to where I was living. But no, I was newly married, brand new converted flat, just as the property market was taking off. We managed to just get it in time before an interest rates really soared straight afterwards. But then my husband was sent away, and then we had trouble with the tenants below who wouldn't go out and we couldn't get them out. They were sort of squatting, and I was threatened. I lost my job through redundancy, admittedly, but I would have had to leave, the country to carry on with that job. So all of these things happened, and then I think one day my husband saw a newspaper article, said, "You might be interested in this," and it just connected that all the places I'd lived before had an impact on how I was. So sometimes if we'd rented for a while before we bought, and I was in one place and I felt really, really anxious and really nervous all the time. And in fact, we were burgled in that property. So that anxiety, was fairly well founded. Other places, finances were really difficult, and it just, or we argued a lot. That was quite an interesting one. So there were lots of different things, but when you're living like 6 months or a year somewhere, you start to impact. Oh, well, actually, that makes sense. And I often have clients now who say, "Oh, I haven't been feeling well," and I said, "Well, how long's that been going on?" Probably since I moved in here, actually. And we don't always make that connection. Yeah. But the flat from hell was one where basically I'd been threatened by this guy who's squatting, who was also dealing drugs and wanted by the police, and had a dog that barked all night. And things weren't a calm environment. Let's say my husband was away, so he couldn't really help me. And in hindsight, I took all the readings for the property at a later date, and found it had, sort of like the worst possible readings on just about every level you could have. And we also lost money on it. So we were in negative equity. So we couldn't get rid of it. So, and that went on for quite a long time. So we had to, if we rented it out afterwards, the tenant would perhaps do a runner or paid late, or, there's lots of different problems, but it's always a problem. Hence my calling it the flat from hell.
Okay. So your husband gave you that article to read?
Yeah.
And what happened then?
Well, that's where I got to that was Western, and I call it Western Feng Shui. So it's the bagua, the it is a relationship corner, put your door along one orientation, etc. So I went to some courses and started learning some about that. And then just as I was forced out of the property, I effectively ran away. I packed a bag. My husband said, I can get us a secondment to Scotland. Let's go. So I sort of packed a bag and drove, basically. And when I was up there, I met Grandmaster Chan, the person who I asked him to do a talk. I met a friend who was equally studying that. So through Feng Shui, and we said, there's a man who's just in the Scotsman newspaper. Let's ask him to do a talk. And lo and behold, I met Master Chan. So through Western Feng Shui, I met him. I've never really admitted that I was learning Western Feng Shui from him, because I just sort of realised that it was a lot deeper than what I'd come across. A lot deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. And what happened then? So you started studying with him? Did you?
Yeah. So it so happened that he needed somebody to work with him to assist him. So my friend, who became a colleague, so we sort of became a trio where she'd do his diary, but I would drive to consultations for him. So it's not at all a traditional apprenticeship, but probably as close as it could be. So we'd drive all over, mostly Scotland, but all over the place doing consultations. So I'd follow him, I'd take the notes, and eventually we established a school and started doing courses. But it's gone on from there, really. So he's mostly retired now. He's passed on his baton to the next master, who's a senior master. So I now work with him and her, still on consultations, but equally, it's been sort of in the last 20 years or so working on my own clients as well. So I still have that connection, and we have a research foundation called the Choi Foundation. So it's a group of people from worldwide who've studied Feng Shui. In this traditional, it's called Choi style Feng Shui, which is that particular master style of Feng Shui.
And how do you, because you said Western Feng Shui, and I think what we do is much deeper. Can you give an example of that? So what's the difference?
Yeah, well, traditional Feng Shui, and I'd sort of do that. I think they sometimes call it black hat Feng Shui, so the Western version, but ours is imperial Feng Shui. That's the traditional Feng Shui, the sort of the essential Feng Shui. So it's about taking a reading of a front door and a back door. And so the front door is the mouth, and the back is obviously where the energy leaves, and then the spine of the building. And from that, you get a set of calculations that tell you about the quality of energy going in the property, what's leaving it, what it's like overall. Sometimes there's a sort of like a predominant characteristic. Sometimes their house is a bit fiery, a bit mischievous, a bit argumentative. Sometimes there's money energy. Sometimes it's good for careers. And then whether it's quiet energy in a space or active energy, which is, all these things are really useful for knowing whether it's good for a bedroom, whether it's good for an office, the colours it should be, because this energy that we're defining, it relates to the 5 element cycle, and how they interact helps you decide what elements, what you need to put in. So you might need a colour to mediate between a certain, so if you've got mischief energy, you might need something to calm it down. So you might put colours that relate to those elements. If you've got money energy, you might want to enhance that, but you might not want that as a bedroom. So there's all these different things that come from these calculations, and it tells you whether the property's got money energy at all. Sometimes it's great for a business, it's got money energy, but if you're working from home and you haven't got money energy in your readings, it doesn't really help for a successful or a profitable business. So all of those things come from taking the readings, which is that compass again.
Wow, interesting. Can you show us the compass again?
Yes.
Because so for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you are now seeing the compass, what that Maria is talking about. And if you're listening on a podcast, jump on over to our YouTube channel and have a look, because it's very, very intricate and very, very detailed, isn't it?
So it's a Chinese compass in the middle, a normal, well, it's magnetic compass, but actually the Chinese compass points south. They're ahead of us and they got there first. They point there south. And then the central position, the central plate, the golden plate, rotates. So when you land it against the door, you would line up the compass, and then the information along there. It's mostly Chinese, some numbers. And that gives me the readings that help me define us, depending if you do Feng Shui.
So you go into people's homes and do readings for them. So people also possibly live in a house that don't feel happy, and then they're like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
They end up contacting you going, just come out and see us because we don't know what's going on here. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's once you've had it done and you know what the impact is, obviously people come back and say, well, actually, I'm going to buy a new house. Can you check it for me? But I don't want to make the same mistake again, or, sort of this one felt so much better. Let's get another good one. So yeah, basically, if something is awry, often I tend to say, is there a problem? If someone hasn't told me, I say, well, if it's, if there's not a problem, your Feng Shui is probably okay. But if there's something, or someone's not doing so well in the house, or something doesn't feel right, then it's they'll call up and say, well, we're not sure whether to stay or whether to go, or whether there's something wrong, or whether we're just imagining it, or ... And it can be any number of reasons. But yeah, usually if people feel that there's something wrong, there often is.
Yeah. And then how do you know that you've got a problem? Because people get sick, or they're just unhappy, or how can people realize, like, oh, there's actually something wrong with the energy in my house?
Well, it's a difficult one, really, because when I say, is your home supportive, that it's not going to necessarily protect you from life's ups and downs, not all of them. No. But if you have those things that happen to all of us, and you still feel that you've got a support system, because it will impact how friends are, whether your finances, if everything comes in and then goes straight back out, or it could be, one family member might be not doing as well. Or it could be all the women are feeling really worn out, or all the men, or men don't like being in the house a lot, or your one particular child doesn't feel, thriving. Or I had one once recently where, one of the children was very argumentative all the time. And the energy of that child's space was obviously impacting how they felt without them realizing, because it's a very subtle thing. So it's sometimes just something doesn't feel right. And it can be ill health, of course, yes. But it could equally be something a lot simpler, that, we're always worn out, something like that. Or we can't, in the case, probably some of your readers, maybe they don't feel that they can either let go of things or keep clutter under control. And that's often, and then, or can be impacted by the energy of the space. Either the energy is draining, so that people feel that they have to hold on to things because they, we sense energy, particularly women actually, but men do. They just don't. They perhaps maybe like to rationalize it a bit more, and that is massively sexist. And I apologize, but in terms of my clients, I would suggest that. But so, if you feel something's missing or something's lacking, you often hold on to other things for that reason. So sometimes that can be a clutter thing. So yeah, those sorts of things. If you can't control a certain, a certain issue or a certain area, sometimes it's one room. Oh, I can't keep up, this, people will be ashamed to, oh, I'm sorry about this room, and they'll open it and it'll be maybe a bit more cluttered than perhaps certainly that they want. So, those sorts of things are, there's such a wide spectrum of how the energy impacts how you live.
I'm like hanging on to every word you're saying, Maria. So, okay. Whew, lots to take in. Let's go for a break, and then after the break, I need to know more. I don't know how about you listeners, but I definitely want to know more. So let's go for a break, and we'll see you soon. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're chatting to Maria, who is a Feng Shui master. She's been sharing lots of information with us about the background of Feng Shui, how it traveled into the West, how she found out she was so interested. She's been talking about energy. She's been sharing her compass. But now I think what it would be very interesting to know from Maria is more like, because she touched upon the decluttering and the clutter in people's homes already a little bit, because that's how I first came into contact with Feng Shui, because I read an article, or I think I read a book somewhere, and it talked about, well, yes, you don't want to have clutter under your bed because you don't want to sleep on clutter. And for me, I was like, well, that makes complete sense, right? You don't want to do that. But of course, I hadn't realized that it could possibly be connected to Feng Shui. And also, I never like having stuff on doors. That's another thing that I never liked it. I don't know why, but somebody said, oh yeah, that I read it somewhere. And I thought, yeah, you don't want to hang because your door needs to open properly. And I thought, you see, I am doing Feng Shui without even knowing it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what kind of examples can you give? Because is clutter, I mean, we know that clutter isn't great for your home, but how can you feel that when you connect it to Feng Shui?
Well, it's a difficult one to say how much is clutter and how much is comfortable living.
Yes.
And I think it's a fine line. I'm not a minimalist. I think sometimes, and in terms of the energy, if something is really sparse and really empty, great if it's a museum and you can focus on these pieces, but a home needs to have a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of nourishing, and if it looks too barren, then that's not helpful. So I'm not giving people sort of suggestion that it's great to have heaps of stuff where you can't move around, but if you have a lot of stuff, the energy can't flow easily. And if the energy can't flow easily, it can't flow in or out, and it becomes quite stagnant. So sometimes you can see if you've got lots and lots of furniture, if you've maybe inherited furniture or you haven't let stuff go, or sort of we value things that perhaps other people don't value as much, so we don't want to sell them because no one will give us the money for it or something like that. But so comfortable spaces. So there needs to be space around things, I think, really, in a simple thing, because you need to let energy in. And if you're crammed full, then the energy can't get in, which means good opportunities, luck, money, fun, happiness, health are all impacted because they are all come part of energy. So letting energy in, having space to let the energy flow. As you say, opening doors. Doors' function is to open and close. That's what they're supposed to do. They let energy in. I mean, our front door is the mouth of the building. So, let things open and close. Being able to not having loads of furniture behind and hanging things from is fundamental. You're right. So those things, and things, we hold on to things, obviously, and they have an energy about them. But often we hold on to things because we have a sentimental attachment, but sometimes those things can hold us back too. So it's about having just enough that it's comfortable, that things are under control, things under your bed. Yes, if it's bedding, that can be stored under your bed, but exercise equipment, well, basically you never use it, you sleep with it, so it becomes dormant and invisible. So those sorts of things. Equally, having lots of clutter in spaces is just that constant to-do list, isn't it? It's exhausting having piles of things. Oh, I need to do something with that. So all of that is quite a fundamental part of just letting some things go and letting in fresh energy. And we all get a lift if you tidy something, don't you? You just feel amazing. Yeah. So if you can sort of keep that going, but still, don't rob yourself of the lovely things in your life that mean something, but letting go of the things that aren't adding is really fundamental, I think.
Yeah. I see so many overlaps between the message that Leslie and I want to give out to the world. It's all about find the quality over the quantity.
Yeah.
We're not here to say have nothing in your house, but the stuff that's in your house needs to serve you and do you good and be helpful, and you need to love it and use it and treasure it. But having there is such a thing as having too much of a good thing,
it really is. Yeah.
When your whole house is full of stuff that belong to other people, whether it's given to you because they wanted to get rid of it or because they passed away and it's all ended up in you.
Yeah.
You need to see yourself in your house and not a past of somebody else or a past of your family. But of course you can keep the treasures. Of course you can keep the things that mean something to you, but you want space to be open. And I have some shelves here that are full of pictures. And I think a lot of people think just because Leslie and I are professional organizers, we have nothing in our houses, but that's not the case at all. But we do curate our collection when stuff comes in, other stuff leaves, because it needs to keep that flow, I think.
Yeah. I think it's a Buddhist philosophy that if you get given something, you take the meaning from that gift, because obviously, that's the thing. Someone has wanted to give you something, but you can still then pass it on while still having that, I mean, obviously regifting can get a bad name, but doesn't have to be a nasty idea, the idea of that. And I've seen clients and I've said, that's rather blocking such and such. Are you really attached to it? And they said, oh no, it was given to me by somebody who didn't like it because the woman she got given wasn't a very nice person. You have that in your bedroom. There's some leftover chi there that you really perhaps isn't helping you. So it's it's worth doing, I think. Really.
Yeah. I also picked up somewhere that clutter above you in a loft or an attic or clutter below you in a basement can really, really not help with Feng Shui. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's an element of that because obviously it's there. It's hanging over you. I speak as a person who has quite a full loft. But if you rationalize what you have, if it's stored, if you're storing broken things you don't need, if you're just shoving it out of the way, then it's there. So it defeats the object in that sense. Also, even in a simpler form, if you're working and you have things above your desk, piles of shelves where you're facing a wall with shelves, you're going to be stressed. You're going to feel, you've got all this pressure above you. So whether it's your loft or your shelves, it's above you. And equally, if you've got, oh my goodness, something above your bed and you've got shelves above your built-in cupboards, you've got pressure always above your head. So think about sometimes even the smaller. So yes, loft and basement, but also, above your head when you're working or sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very good advice. I agree. Now, when I was, of course, preparing for this podcast, because I don't randomly just show up and throw some questions at our guests, I do prepare. And I came across a very interesting handout that you have, and you talk about Feng Shui mistakes, and we already talked about the minimalism, but there's several that you think could be mistakes. Right? Could you share a few with us?
Yeah, I think the first one, and it's the simplest, is can you see your front door from the street? So that's if the energy can reach your front door, then it can reach you. It's like, trying to spoon feed a child or something. You need to be able to see the mouth to get the food in. So that's a simple one. But when you're at the front door, can you see straight through? So there's a lovely style that the architects have where they want you to enter the property and see a view or see through but basically, if you're from your front door, if you can see straight through, or you can see a bathroom or another window, then the energy is going straight through the house. So it's from front to back and it's not circulating. And that will mean that any energy that comes in, and when I'm talking energy, that's luck, that's opportunities, that's money, will go straight out. So, funds, whatever you earn isn't able to be saved, and equally opportunities. And if you're trying to sell a house, obviously you want your offer, the offer to stick and the buyer to stick. So that sort of thing is fundamental. So that is such a simple thing. But if you can change that, and it could be putting a curtain on a door, or putting an automatic closer if you have a door from between the front door and the view, creating some kind of blockage, you're holding the energy into the property, and I guarantee it will make a difference to the energy. It's such a simple thing. So that is my first thing. Can you see the front door? But when you're at the front door, facing in, what can you see? And, automatic close, if you've got a bathroom or, something's a really simple £10 mechanism that pushes the door closed. Obviously, you consider pets and things, but there are ways around these. It's very practical things you can do. But just to block that energy flowing out is your very first, most effective thing. And it's one of those things I tell so many clients when that's an issue. That's the first one. Well, where else? In your kitchen, if you have lots of arguments in your kitchen, you have a look and see if your sink and your hob are opposite each other.
Okay.
Because your sink is yin, water. So that's the mother, the moon, etc. The hob represents the fire, which is the yang, which is the father. So these yin yang split the description to look at the fire and water and how they react together. And obviously we know fire and water are in conflict. So if you find you argue a lot in your kitchen, have a look at whether your hob and your sink are opposite each other. It's slightly difficult to completely do a kitchen. There are ways around it. Other things, there's a real trend for dark walls. Dark walls are lovely and stylish, but they make everything very, very yin. And yin is very passive and quite stagnant. And really, when you're in a home, you want to balance yin and yang. And to try and make a dark room light, you have to have like 3 or 4 times the amount of light fittings. So you're working against the natural energy of a space. And that can be really quite difficult. So it can make you very tired. It's very difficult to sleep in because you just feel very sluggish all the time. You don't want to wake up. And if you're trying to run a business from a space like that, equally, you're having to work really, really hard to stimulate the energy. We're trying to get yang energy, which is that fresh energy that keeps us going.
Interesting. And you also had something to say about mirrors, right?
Oh, yeah. Mirrors are really, really effective. And, I was talking earlier when there's a flat where when I first started, we used to argue a lot. If you have mirrors opposite each other, unless you're a salon, a hair salon or a clothes boutique, having mirrors opposite each other sends the energy back and forward. So you can often argue. So when I was getting ready in the olden days in this particular flat we were renting, my husband was getting ready the other mirror, and we would just argue the whole time. And we weren't, not really an argumentative type of couple, but they are powerful. They draw energy to them. So if you have them in the right place, they can stimulate energy. And the best energy would be on a north wall or a southeast wall. There they can stimulate money energy. But if you have them opposite the front door, they will send energy straight back out. So best not to have them opposite the front door or behind a toilet. So every time you go into a restaurant and you see a mirror behind the loo, wow, their funds are being drained down because it's drawing energy to the loo and drawing it straight down.
Good to know. So we're all going to pay attention now. Last one that I thought was interesting was the position of a bed is really important as well, isn't it, in a room?
Yes. Yeah. When I'm in a room, I'm looking at how it suits the person. So how the energy of that space suits the person based on the compass and based on the energy, the specific energy. So that's very much tailored to the people who live there. But if you're in general, first of all, the question is, how do you sleep? Because it's always, if it's not broken, don't fix it. There are always exceptions to the Feng Shui rules, always. But if you're not sleeping well, is your bed in line with the door? So if you stand at the door to the room, can you see all of the bed? If you can, then the energy is coming quite quickly at you, which means you're not being able to get a protected space to sleep in, and we all need calm to sleep in. So can you move the bed away from the door, so either behind the door or just so that you're at a slightly better angle across the room so that it doesn't hit you straight away? Sometimes, obviously, particularly with babies, we put them close to the door because if they're crying, you need to see them and get to them, but they're then completely buffeted by this energy. So out of line of the door is the best space to sleep.
I find it fascinating. I am so interested. Thank you so much for sharing all this amazing information with us. Is there anything else that I've missed or that you would like to share with our listeners? Have you got a top tip for people who are decluttering, or how they can, is there anything else that you think they can improve their house with?
It's difficult because so many things I can't think of. Can't say all of them. I think about how your house feels to you, and just try and see it with a stranger's eyes. Does this look like, or how does this feel? Personally, the one thing I go to time and time again, if I'm concerned about something, or if I think I could do with a pep, how we all do have to sometimes keep an eye on what we do. I'm sure sometimes you might think, oh, if my clients could see me now, would they think that's a good idea? But if I'm thinking I need to give myself a pep, I always look at the north position in my house, particularly outside. North obviously always gets mossy quickly because it doesn't get as much sun in winter time. So I always give it a clean, a good wipe, because the north represents the lead female in the house. So that's me. And north represents the support from outside, so opportunities, friends, luck, etc. So if I keep that nice and tidy, or maybe keep some plants there, or if I need a pep, I might get some flowers or a flowering plant outside. So I do it inside and outside. I always look at that space. If I'm thinking I've done that, okay, right, I could do a bit more, or the house needs I need to do something for me, I'll look at the southwest in my house, because that's how the house supports me. So I'd look at those two places, and if they are cluttered, look at them and say, does this represent what I want? Because those two, if you start there, everything else is a bit easier. You say, is that what I want? Is that, does that represent the life I want to lead, or the energy I want to bring in? So I'd say particularly north, but southwest as well.
Well, you've heard it here first, listeners. The north and the southwest is what you need to focus on. And yes, I love that you said, is there a lot of clutter, and does it represent me? Because I completely agree with you. Both Leslie and I have done so many decluttering in houses with clients, and as soon as you just declutter some stuff, the room starts to feel lighter. Yeah, it starts to all fall into place a little bit. Yeah. The client feels better. It's like a weight lifted off their shoulders, and they stand up just a little bit taller, going, this feels so nice. This feels so good. And I think that's why I'm so on board with everything that you're saying, because we've seen it, in our clients' houses, in the membership, our lovely members who are doing so well with their decluttering and organizing. And you can see that because they build on that decluttering, it does get easier. You have to just take that one step forward every day to make a difference. It won't change overnight. It's the same, probably, Maria. You're not going to see your clients overnight suddenly, money comes in and energy comes in, but you need to build on those foundations.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. It's not, if you can think about it, it's not so much of what you're letting go, it's what you're letting in. So it's a real positive.
Oh, that's my favorite quote.
I might have to remember it myself.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. So if our listeners would like to know more about you, about possibly doing a consultation with you, just maybe signing up for your blog, or finding out the more about the 10 mistakes, where can they find you?
Well, my company is called Dynamic Spaces. So I have a website, which is dynamicspaces.co.uk.
Yeah.
I've got Facebook as well, and Instagram is Maria Green Dynamic Spaces. So yes, you can sign up. There's a sign up on both of those, so you can get your 10 crucial Feng Shui mistakes that affect the energy of your home. And and if you've got any questions, then please email me at either of those, or Maria at Dynamic Spaces. I love to talk to people about Feng Shui.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being such an amazing guest. I've loved having you.
It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. So, listeners, has this podcast inspired you to make changes to your home based on the Feng Shui principles that Maria has been talking about? Let us know in the comments. declutterhub.com/255. I can't wait to hear what you got to say about this podcast. We know you love listening week in, week out. We appreciate you so much. And if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for being here. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.